In a time when technology is reshaping every corner of the creative industries, what does it mean to cast a performance? Not just efficiently, but beautifully and memorably. We're 18 months out from a SAG strike that brought U.S. production to a standstill. And at the heart of that conflict was a deep anxiety about the future. Actors are under increasing threat from AI, voice replacement, and shrinking residuals. With global casting logistics driven by data and box office spreadsheets, it begs the question, what happens if humanity is forgotten for the sake of efficiency? This week, I'm joined by John Papsidera and Kim Winther, the casting powerhouses behind Oppenheimer, Tenet, Yellowstone, Landman, and the soon-to-be-released Superman and the Odyssey. John's company, Automatic Sweat, works with the best in the business, from Christopher Nolan to James Gunn and Taylor Sheridan, just to name a few. John and Kim show us how leading with empathy, artistic instinct, and human connection doesn't make you obsolete, it makes you essential. We talk about how the speed of international box office reporting was a technological shift that changed what kind of actors get cast, one of the first ways that casting was fundamentally changed by technology in the modern era, and whether a new shift is occurring with data surrounding social media. We talk about how self-tapes born out of COVID necessity have reshaped the audition process, opening doors globally to new talent outside of LA, but sometimes at the cost of spontaneity and connection. And we talk about something far more important: why John trains his team to show up fully and emotionally in every casting session, being emotionally present as actors and humans on the other side of the script to ensure that actors don't feel alone when doing the most important part of their job, being vulnerable on command. This episode reveals how the best in the business are adapting, not by chasing every new tool, but by doubling down on what machines can't replicate: intuition, emotion, and nuance. It's proof that when you build trust through artistry, you don't just survive disruption, you thrive in it. If you're in the creative world and interested in how experts are adapting and thriving among the tectonic shifts in the creative industries, this episode might give you a little inspiration. Well, I'll just give a little introduction to you both. John is the founder, and you guys are the casting team at Automatic Sweat, doing some of the most amazing casting work in Hollywood for quite some time, but especially in the last couple of years with Oppenheimer, obviously, which I think everybody recognized was a supreme feat of casting, and working with Christopher Nolan on Tenet and the Odyssey now, and also working in television on Westworld and Yellowstone, and having just very exciting for me cast Superman. When Oppenheimer did so well, and then immediately they announced the casting Oscar, I sort of felt like there must be a little bit of chagrin on your side, because on the one hand, obviously, amazing that they're finally acknowledging casting, and B, such a bummer because you clearly would have won it.
I don't know. People say that, and it's a kind thought, and maybe. But I didn't win the Artios Award that year, so
Yeah.
so for Oppenheimer. So
Well, what do they know?
who knows, right? Yeah, right. But anyway, yes, thank you for saying that, and we're really proud of Oppenheimer and everything that we get to collaborate on.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think took so long for the Oscars to start acknowledging casting in that way? It's something that the Emmys have done for quite some time. You have won some Emmys for casting.
Yeah.
What do you think took so long?
From what I understand, and not having been in those rooms, but from what I understand of those meetings, there's a certain proprietary quality directors and producers have over their products, over their projects. And I think, for the longest time, no one wanted to give due to casting directors because they wanted to claim it as their own. I can remember many things that I had done, and back in the day of DVDs when they had like little special added bonus tracks when it came out. I'd sit and watch directors and producers say things like, "Oh, when they came in the room, I knew it was them, and I'm this and I'm that," and take ownership of it. For me, I always wanted to kind of go, and you didn't know who they were before they walked in that door. So, it has been a long time coming, but I think it's been wrapped up in ego and directors, wanting the claim for their project. And I get it. I don't disagree with it, But if you're going to give awards to cinematographers and wardrobe and hair people and
And
makeup
makeup
and,
and
then
sound.
why? Yeah. I mean, none of those things exist without
Mhm.
without an actor.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
for me, that's the inception and the beginning of all of it.
So, a rare example in Hollywood of ego stifling forward momentum.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes.
Right.
There,
Right.
yeah, an
Yeah.
anomaly in this business,
Right.
but yes, there it was.
Right.
Yes.
And I mean, it's also, there was a documentary about this called Casting By, where they sort of addressed that some directors won't even credit casting directors with the title casting director. It has to say casting by because they don't like to share the word director with too many
Yeah.
people. And
Right.
so,
Yeah, but yet director of photography, there's
yeah,
plenty of other examples that
they are fine to dole it out.
yeah, that was Taylor Hackford, I believe,
Yeah.
is the offending party.
What do you think then is the sort of the heart or the creative essence of the casting director's job?
Kim, you want to start that?
John gives much more thoughtful answers on this. I
Yeah.
always admire his answers, so I always just
Yeah.
listen and I take mental notes for when I'm asked solo.
um, where does it start? For me, it kind of starts in the soul of the project. I think our job is about matching human souls to something that's two-dimensional on a page. And that is an intuitive process in a lot of different ways. I mean, yes, there's an intuition of how you feel this character is and people that align with that in your kind of library and consciousness of actors, all the way down to physically matching people and having to worry about, lookalikes. And so I think it starts in a lot of different areas. It's amorphic in that way. It's not a straight line from A to B. And I think it takes, for me, it takes the influence of all those things. It takes the influence of sitting with Kim and saying, what do you think about this person? What do you think about that person? Her, texting me and saying, who'd be great is this person. It's those conversations. It's also dramaturgy. It's reading a script and going, oh, there's a moment there to be played by an actor that I imagine this person could do. So it's a mixture of, binary and non-binary actions, imagination and facts coming together to create what I feel is, I guess, a painting or a mosaic of human experiences.
There's obviously a move, it seems, in the modern era that a lot of projects are coming pre-packaged, and so those decisions are being made before a studio even comes to it. I imagine that moves you even further up the development process. Are you guys being engaged that early with a project?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And especially what John and I have been doing with a company that we started together about a year ago called Fjord Horse, which our sort of intention behind it was to, amplify newer voices or different voices or people that may not necessarily have the reach that, when they're starting kind of from ground zero and trying to get a project made. And we can, attach ourselves and sort of use our connections and help amplify projects that we really believe in. And so, especially on those projects, we find ourselves, starting with nothing. Financing is dependent on who we can get talent wise, and then that will greenlight a project, or that will then mean someone takes a project out to sell it. So we're really starting from day one on a lot of these sort of, especially indie films that have, combo financing, foreign financing, things like that.
You mentioned foreign financing. It was obviously a big technological shift in your guys' profession when foreign box office sales started to be reported a lot faster. It used to be, obviously, in the 80s that domestic sales were all anybody cared about because domestic sales, at least you could reliably get information on last weekend's box office immediately. And then once foreign sales got the technology to be able to report that a lot faster, it meant obviously that people were realizing that certain talent was incredibly valuable in foreign territories. And then it led to this shift in and independent film financiers pre-selling foreign rights based largely on talent in those territories. Obviously, that's a technological shift that impacted your job. How did that practically change the way you approach a project? As that's become a bigger part of the way films get made.
Yeah, it did. There was a point in time where, foreign financing and foreign properties, and like you said, reporting of the success or failure of projects was delayed. And so, and there still is that to some degree. When you talk about financing a film, there are people that will mean something to a domestic market that mean absolutely nothing to a foreign market. And so the time has happened faster. I mean, it used to be that, they were probably a year or so behind what the studios were doing if you're just talking about foreign financing. They wouldn't know about who had films in the can that was coming up the pipeline. They wouldn't take risks on people. It was all about, well, what is their value? And let's look at the numbers and what their box office has done. That is still true by and large. I mean, to some degree. I think it's quicker now, but I think, diversity can still be a challenge in a foreign market. People that have not been in huge box office successes or tentpole movies still find it difficult to, be banked on by foreign financiers. So it still exists. It might be a tad bit closer, but the realities is this still is a very different marketplace, even though the entertainment business has been globalized in so many ways.
And it's also, for us on our end, when we're talking about starting earlier and earlier on projects, when they're putting financing together or they're trying to pre-sell something, with someone attached, I mean, it is, affecting the creativity behind the project and who you go after, because it's just the reality of, who makes that math equation work and who will give you the $10 million you need to do that movie. That might not be your top choice. It might be someone that you really like, but it might be your third choice. And that, and then it sort of branches out from there of just who you target and who you go for.
And that's really the genesis of when we talk about A-list actresses or A-list actors, is the actor or actress who's getting you the most amount of money in either foreign pre-sales or backing from the studio. That's very interesting. Ethan Hawke and Maya Hawke mentioned the power currently that social media influence has in getting one cast in a project, and that's actually almost mirroring the foreign sales approach. Are you guys seeing that as well? Sometimes it's socials that are tipping the balance, or people having an inbuilt following on social media?
I think it's been a phenomenon that people have been trying to figure out for years, and nobody successfully has done it. Because every TikTok star would then be starring in a movie if there was any correlation. The fact is that sure, it'll come up at some point of, yeah, but they have 7 million followers. But it's kind of an ancillary conversation. It is not really a primary conversation, because I don't think anybody really can prove that that turns into people buying a ticket. It's one thing watching stuff for free online and following somebody in a, passive way. It's very different when you then, their interactiveness with those talent, with those, the talent becomes more solidified, and I know that's what people are trying to go for, like the interactivity between, their followers and who they are. Some actors really try and give content to it. Some people are just promoting things they're paid to promote. So I think there is probably some algorithm in there about, how much people are really invested in the people they follow. But I don't know that there's a direct correlation, and I've not seen anybody be able to prove that in numbers yet.
Do you find that question is a bit of a canary in the coal mine? It's sort of...
Yes, totally. I think it's something people hope for, and they try and add to the equation of, well, we should cast them because of this. But And that doesn't mean that, social media marketing campaigns don't work and get more eyeballs and things and expose it. But I don't think that there's a direct correlation between followers and people buying tickets and going to the theater.
You were talking before about your human connection to a project and starting with the soul of a project, which I thought was a really beautiful way of describing how reading something impacts you and then kind of taking the vision of what you've seen, the brief descriptions. I mean, generally a casting description in a script is ideally one beautiful line,
Yeah.
It certainly is in Chinatown. It certainly is even with John McClane in Die Hard. It's one great line that you go, oh, I get everything I need to know about this person. And that feels, you have to have a connection with the writer. Then you have to have a connection with the director and how they're, potentially going to see it. I'm interested in, really the last year you've done an incredible example of biography casting in Oppenheimer. And then you've done, Yellowstone has just ended, but that was your handiwork as well. How does your perspective from casting a film to a television show change? Because obviously with a film, everything that character is going to experience in that 120 pages. In television, the smallest amount that they can possibly show you to tell you who this person is, and then they're going to put that person through the ringer for 10 seasons, or it must change your perspective of how to come at a project, and how does it?
Ken, do you want to talk about this?
Well, I think, you sort of hope that the other creatives that you're working with, like the writers, producers, they have a sense and can give you a sense of where the character is going, at least in that season. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they have a pilot written and they're like, we don't have anything else to show you. And then it's sort of, at least my approach to it is I go the selfish route and I think, okay, well, what do I think? What is my take on this character? And I just kind of run with it and until we start having creative conversations around lists or watching auditions and them saying, oh, I saw it this way, or, it's sort of something develops out of that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the onus is on us to some degree, and I've always taken it on in that, it's our job to give people, talent with as many bullets in the gun as possible. And that you think about, especially in television, but even in film, what an actor can bring to this role. Whether it's explored or not, that's on the director and that's on editing and a lot of things. But, I've always felt like it's important to try and give people the most talented person that you can and look at it in a limitless way as opposed to a finite way.
And I think that also, it's our job. Our job isn't just to cast projects. Our job is to be familiar with these actors and their versatility and to know them beyond just the one scene or two scenes we bring them in to read for this specific project. Our job is to know, to have seen them do all sorts of different things or have had them read for all sorts of different things for us before, to be able to speak to them sort of holistically, not just this version of this actor doing this character.
That's very interesting because I think that one of the beautiful things that you guys get to do, there have been lots of actors. The one I remember most clearly is Michael Keaton saying, when I realized that going into a casting wasn't trying to get the job, it was the job itself. I have 7 minutes where I've been given lines. I've got to inhabit a character. That's my performance. I'm right now doing a job. And the beautiful thing about that is you guys are sitting there watching lots of, hopefully, very good actors, really giving it their all. That must give you over time a really good understanding of what an actor can do. And I would assume that you see someone take unique decisions enough times in the room and you start to believe in them. How does that work? Because I'm sure a lot of actors, they walk out of that room going, well, I either lost it or I won it. And they don't realize that actually on that cutting room floor are people like you who see their skill set or don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, It is a fascinating and magical process, the casting, for me, in that you do get to see different interpretations. I think it would be surprising to a lot of people, though, how similar a lot of actors will be in reading a role, as opposed to, and I encourage actors to do this all the time, to, really try and make unique decisions and choices in what you do, because that ultimately is what separates you from everyone else. Everybody else is, like you said, has the same lines, the same words, the same context of the scene. It's how you infuse yourself into that scene and bring parts of yourself to that character, whether it's how you talk, whether it's a choice of assuming something about that character or not making an assumption about that character that then plays out. And, for me, that's the real reward of casting. People will say, well, how many bad actors or how many horrible auditions have you seen? To me, what stays with me is the moments when you feel like you're in the presence of an artist. And those are the things that still give me chills when I think about it over time. And that's what we hope for all actors. I mean, we want them to come in and be brilliant, and we just all we can do is try and encourage and lead them that way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, actors that are scared of going into the room with the casting directors or feel like it's this. And, I've only ever worked for John, so I can't speak to other casting offices or how other casting directors work. But I think like the number one mantra in this office and the environment that John has created and his, long and incredible career is just that he is rooting for every single actor. He wants every actor that he brings into a room and shows a director or producer or writer, he wants them to be the one to get the role. He is rooting for every single one for different reasons and so I think there's a lot of anxiety, and it sort of breaks my heart when actors come into the room and they're so, even if it's just reading with me, and they're so nervous and there's so much baggage and there's so much just sort of going on. And sometimes it's just about kind of like giving them the space to just feel that and then get over it and then realize, okay, cool. This is like very, low stakes, chill. Let's just play and have fun and do the job. Like my
Yeah,
said.
it's interesting because I think actors think that everybody's not rooting for them in the room, whereas
Yeah.
in the room, if they nail it, everybody can go home. I mean, this is job's
Exactly.
done. Everybody's happy,
Yeah.
and we move on to
If they
casting
nail
someone
it,
else.
it checks the box on that role and we get to. But it is funny that the perception is, like, why would we bring an actor in that we don't believe in and that we don't like and we don't think can do the role?
Right. Yeah, we don't.
Then we're bad at doing our jobs.
Right. Yeah.
Because then we're suddenly bringing in terrible people for directors and producers and writers that, when they turn to us and say, what do you think? Oh, well, we've hated them their whole careers. Like, that just would never happen.
Right. Yeah.
But it's funny that is sort of the perception at times. And, there's that scene in the casting scenes in La La Land, too, that don't really help portray casting in the most favorable light.
I think it's comforting, I think, to know that you guys are so receptive to people's performance. But I also imagine that it means that the more somebody takes a risk and is talented, the more likely they are to get at least callbacks in to the last round. And the last round, it probably comes down to all sorts of ephemera. I would imagine the best actor has made it to the last round almost every time, even if you end up choosing someone else for some other reason.
Yeah, I think that's by and large the truth, unless there's somebody that they just absolutely don't. I'm not going to name names, but there was a show that we did that, the actress has gone on to, do incredible work and in her own right that I was campaigning for, and they just didn't see it. There was a physicalization of the character that they were like, oh no, that won't work. And I was like, why not? And so, there are those things that you come up against time and time again. But yes, I mean, I think by and large, the process whittles it down and it separates, what's really special and what resonates with actors with a role and a role with actors through the process of, reading and auditioning and taping and talking.
And, just to add to that, like what's cool for me as someone who's been mentored by John my whole career, I've been so lucky, but sort of growing up under his, tutelage. And just there was I won't name names, but there was the show that we were doing where they were trying to cast the male lead. And there was one obvious person that John and I felt very strongly about. And the producers, the studio, no one saw it and kept entertaining these ideas that to us, we just thought like, this is just going to set you up and take you down a direction with the whole series that just isn't what you told us you were trying to make. And to see sort of, there are a lot of people in this industry that are a lot of talk and no walk behind it. And to see John basically threaten to say to quit the show. Not if they didn't listen to him, but basically said, I have expressed that I creatively feel so strongly about this, and you've hired me for my opinion. And if we're not creatively aligned, then I should bow out because this isn't how I see this for you. And just to see someone throw sort of their weight around and just, and after that conversation, they come to a kind of a reality check, but it's just cool to see someone with John's sort of career and success be able to advocate for someone and get people to listen, just because they have so much respect for John and his opinion at the end of the day.
That's amazing. That's probably when they were like, this is a creative endeavor. We should give it an Oscar.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got casting directors chucking their toy mouths out of the pram and threatening to walk off the project.
Yeah.
They are creatives.
Yeah. But also, you were sort of saying that the best actor gets in the room. Sometimes they might not get the role, but I mean, John has been a career maker for so many people because he kept bringing them in for things that they wouldn't get. And then eventually they booked the one gig that they broke through and they're a huge star now. And they're an A-list actor now because he just kept putting them in front of the right people. And sort of pushing it forth. So even if, I think to actors, I always like to say it's not always about not getting that one specific gig. It's just about being in the rooms, being seen and doing good work so that the people that need to advocate for you and need to root for you continue to do so and want to keep bringing you in and putting you in front of people.
I imagine that's incredibly gratifying to be, you've done it twice, I can remember recently with Kelly Riley and David Corenswet now, who's going to be Superman. It must be incredibly gratifying in the case of Kelly Riley, you probably knew it was a special role, but then watching her really level up through her performance, really getting her that. And then with something like Superman, you are immediately leveled up the moment you get the role of Superman. What does that feel like when you feel like you've really been a part of changing an actor's, not just career, but their life?
Yeah, it's a huge honor. And one at times where I feel I'm not worthy of, to be a part of an actor's, career not as an agent, not as somebody that isn't on their team, but as a bystander, but an integral part of that. It is a real honor when you look at that over, a career. I had people and actors in Oppenheimer that, guys that I had known since they were kid actors or, actors that I've known for 20 some odd years playing smaller roles. I think, virtually almost everybody in that cast we knew for a long time. And for them to talk to me afterwards about how important that was to them or how much they appreciated the opportunity and my support and stuff. It's an incredible honor. I feel that actors bestow upon casting directors, especially when it's recognized in that way. I got sweet email from an actress that's in Landman, the Billy Bob show, literally this morning, just saying, I'm going back to set and I was thinking about you and I just wanted to thank you. And, those are the things that stick with you and are, lovely. And it makes you happy for those people that, put up with as much disappointment and as much rejection as they do, to get to a different place in their career.
Yeah, and you see them, they have to be vulnerable on command, and you're seeing them in these moments of peak vulnerability. Yeah, that
It's a
must be incredibly, yeah, yeah.
brutal existence. To
Yeah.
come in and share a bit of your soul every day, 4 times a day, 3 times a day, if you're lucky, with a room full of strangers is incredibly courageous. I feel as an artist, it's, painters don't invite people in every day to watch them paint, yet actors have to invite strangers in to have opinions about them and judgments about them every time they audition. And it's brutal. It's brutal work.
And have to be on the the other end of having to do sometimes incredibly emotional work opposite someone who's sitting there, you know, like this. Sorry, what was my line? Yeah, I don't know. Who's giving them just absolutely nothing. Yeah.
Well, you could try a little harder, Kim, when
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
reading opposite them. It's an idea.
Well, no, but that's sort of what John is known for. If you talk to
Of
any
course.
actor that's auditioned with John, that's the one thing everyone leaves just talking about, and that's sort of all the people that work, for him now in our office or have worked for him. I think that's the biggest gift he bestows upon us as casting directors as we, grow in our careers, is that you act with the actor and you show up and you're as present as they are and you try to give a little bit of your soul back to them. And I think that just comes from John being, studying acting and being an artist himself. But I mean, I definitely, when I first started this job, was not expecting that I would be crying opposite actors in auditions, which I have.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I think our little bubble, we're just very lucky. And I think it's just, I think actors are very lucky to get to work with someone like opposite someone like John. I had to just toot your horn a little bit.
Stop the tooting.
Yeah.
You brought up something there about some of the junior actors that you had worked with who came in and did smaller roles in Oppenheimer. I would imagine there's a difference in your approach, when you're working with somebody like Taylor Sheridan or James Gunn or Christopher Nolan. There's a degree to which these are auteurs that people want to work with, and that they will clear their schedule to a degree. And it's a really wonderful opportunity for an actor. And then you've got other projects, I'm sure, where you've got to duck and dive and kind of be, I assume, selling the project a little bit more. How does your approach change from a marquee project versus somewhere where you're in the middle maybe and it's a bit more on you to get the people in?
Yeah. I mean, you do, I think, you do have to sell. Part of that job is to convince agents and managers why their clients should work with this person, be in this film, be in this television show, whatever that is. And that's a real part of our job. I always felt like I always wanted to be a buyer, not a seller. And why casting, agreed with me. But, the more I look at it over the years, you are just as much a seller as you are a buyer. There are, yes, I will say to Chris Nolan, things like, okay, well, who do you want? It's good to be king of the world. But, on the other hand, the majority of projects are fighting and putting your dukes up and trying to convince people why they should come in the room, why they should do this project, what it might lead to, what the value of it is, all those things. And that's just as important as, the victory laps you take on the other ones.
What, and this question's just for me. We may edit it out, but I need to know, having cast Batman, having now cast Superman.
Yes.
There's obviously a lot of pressure. There's fan pressure from nerds like me. what goes into that? And what do you draw upon? I know Kim was reading. Am I allowed to say, we can edit it out if I'm not, but All-Star Superman to kind of,
Yeah,
get
you
a
can
little
say
bit
that.
immersed in the characters
Yeah.
that James Gunn is going to be drawing from in this new version. Obviously, when Chris did Batman Begins, he's doing copying off Batman Year One, and so a lot of things are being drawn from the comics. Is it just like any other job, or do you go through a slightly different process at all?
I mean, there's a lot of, I think with any project, you have to look at the set of parameters that you're given, and there's different demands on every different project, some of it might be like we were talking about earlier with name recognizability and bankability, financeability. Obviously when you're doing superheroes, there is an archetype of what they are and how they look and how they speak and all that kind of stuff that has to be first and foremost, and so you're looking to fill the shoes of that character in a different way, as opposed to kind of the flip side of that, having an actor breathe life into a character. They still have to breathe life into that character, but it starts with the form. It's like outside in, as opposed to in other projects, it's inside out. And I think that's just a determination that you kind of have to make when you start a project and you read something. Obviously, if you're going to do Superman, you're not bringing in actors that are 5'6" and 125 pounds. So it starts there. And then you kind of work backwards and work inside to those characters. Whereas if it's a total blank slate and you're doing you know, uh, a series that's about, an everyman, it can start in a different place. It starts about, emotionally and how you work outside, inside to the outside, and they become that character. So I don't know if that really answers it, but I think that's a basic kind of format that you kind of start with.
I'm just thrilled that you didn't answer "Shut up, nerd."
No, no, and it's funny because the advent of online fan base and fanboys and stuff that watch it is incredibly, you know, tracked by those filmmakers and those
Yeah.
studios. And you want to fulfill what that, I mean, look, it's all about projection for those people as well and what they make up about those characters. So you don't want to let them down in any way. It just
But I
adds
think
to
on
the
Superman too, it was just because they did so many. Usually, I mean, I can't speak to Batman Begins and stuff because I wasn't there for it, but I imagine a lot of that stuff usually starts in secrecy. With Superman was kind of, James Gunn and Peter Safran have taken over DC Studios. They're going to do Superman. There were a lot of, there was a lot of visibility around it from the get-go. And so there was just a lot of chatter all the time. And we would see deadline note, articles and stuff. And people in the comments were Googling, who's casting it? Oh, it's John Papsidera and he just did this and da-da-da-da. And, people with opinions. And you're kind of like, how do they even know who, why do they care? How do they know? And so I think especially for Superman, that was probably my first that was probably the biggest project sort of worldwide attention wise that I've worked on while casting it and trying to not really look at the comments and not really, go on Reddit and read stuff and let that sort of affect me because we were watching hundreds of self-tapes for all of these roles. And, at the end of the day, trying to show James Gunn a very limited amount to be like, these are the best people. This is what you're looking for. Because when we're watching 400 tapes, he can't watch 400 tapes. And so trying not to let that chatter in was really interesting on mine. And also just so many people asking about it and like you and friends
Yeah.
and whatever
Kim
that are
getting
just
10 texts
curious
from me a
about it.
day.
Yeah.
right. Who's in the
And
running
so
today?
it was an interesting sort of casting process for me on that one, especially because also there were so many rumors of who was testing. And then there were drones above the studio on the test day. And we were like, how do they even know we're here on a Saturday? And so it was very strange to feel like the world was really watching the whole time and trying just not to worry about that and their
Love the
opinion of
internet.
it. Yeah, I know.
Another major shift that's happening, we were speaking before about, the magic that can happen in the room. I feel like some technological shifts are for the better, other for the worse. It seems like there's been a massive shift post-pandemic to self-taping rather than actually being in the casting room. What do you think is lost? What do you think is gained? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Is the benefit of the streamlining of the process and the boiling of the ocean worth the what you lose in the room, or is it just great? That's how we boil the ocean, and then we get them in the room anyway once we're at the next stage. How do you guys feel about
Kim, you want that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I love it and I hate it. And I think what during the pandemic and sort of immediately after the pandemic, whenever that we decided that that ended now, I think it was everything was on Zoom, everything was a self-tape, no one was back in the room, people were still scattered all over the world, and I think we're slowly starting to get back to a mix, and I think a balance is great. I really appreciate self-tapes as a first round approach to things. It allows me as a casting director to be able to say yes to more people, because the amount of time it takes me to read one actor in the room and do the greetings and the hi and the hello and the in and the out, I could probably watch 4 self-tapes of that scene in that same amount of time. And so it's just a more efficient sort of first line of defense, I find. And I think it also, gives opportunity to more actors that I'm not familiar with, because I don't have to limit my time and say, well, I only have 2 hours this whole week every day to do a session. I can now say, never heard of that actor, but this agent that called me and feels really strongly about them, sure, have them tape, I'll watch it. I'm now learning, I'm now getting more familiar with, I'm exploring new talent, learning about new actors. It's giving opportunities to people all over the world, whereas it used to be, are they in LA? Can they come in to read tomorrow? And I think a perfect example of that is, although this was pre-pandemic, was when we were doing Power Rangers. And we were having, there was I forgot how many there were, but I think the 5th Ranger, this sort of the bro-y leader of the group. We had, people that we had liked, but there wasn't sort of a clear, we were going to do chemistry reads, we were going to find the group together. This one kid out of Perth, Australia, the end of the earth, submitted a self-tape on a Wednesday, and the director said, I love him, can he be here Saturday? And he was still finishing drama school and technically wasn't even allowed to be auditioning for stuff yet. And then he ended up being cast in the movie. And so I think it's, stories like that that make me, still believe in doing self-tapes and stuff as a first line of defense. But I do miss the magic that comes out of being in the room. Auditioning someone over Zoom, you just don't get the same connection. You don't get the same, it just doesn't create the same magic all the time that being in the room with someone does. So that's my long-winded answer.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's a terrific story, because I think especially for actors, they only see the downside of it, and then when you're able to kind of point to an example and say, well, somebody who never would have gotten the opportunity to be in the room got an opportunity that they wouldn't have gotten because of this shift. That's pretty great, actually.
And I understand that actors that are used to being in the room then are being asked to self-tape, and that feels less intimate, or that feels less like the level that they are at in their career. But I think it's, part of it, I think, is times are changing and we have to sort of adapt to it. And I also think that we want to be fighting for keeping things the way they were to some extent as well. I do think the best casting comes out of a combination, probably mostly after like the first, after the first round, preferably, probably mostly in person.
And I get, but we also get that, actors are missing out on notes. Actors are missing out on, redirects. If we go, oh yeah, you got this wrong, do that again. That kind of feedback, we try and do it as much as we can. If we really feel like somebody's right and they're close to it, but they just missed it a little bit, we'll ask them to retape. So I get both sides of it. I think there's no perfect answer to it. And here we are. So we do the best
Yeah.
that we can with both processes, and try and still give as much as yourself as you can. I always did feel, when directors and or producers feel like they have to be in the room, it's like, well, okay, but you're not really casting for theater. You're casting for the medium by which you're
Mhm.
looking at it at the moment. And especially now with kids that won't even sit in front of a screen, they'll only look at stuff on their computer or their phones. It's even more relevant of how it works coming across a computer. So, there's advantages and disadvantages to both.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a question I've been kind of asking everyone, which is I had a boss who started a large advertising agency named Dan Wyden, and he had this quote that he sort of had permeate all of the offices. And so even me, a lowly editor and then assistant producer in Amsterdam, I sort of heard it, and it was a very supportive thing. But he said, "You're useless to me until you've fucked up big at least twice." Um, and it was amazing because it actually created this environment where everybody felt supported, and your boss couldn't really yell at you for fucking up that big
Yeah.
because even his boss had basically said that this was a growing and a learning lesson. Are you guys, can you think of, or would you be willing to admit, any time you screwed up, whether it's when you're an assistant or yesterday,
Yeah.
that was a big screw up and what you learned from it?
Hmm. That's a good question. Um,
John, you maybe have a list for Kim.
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. I was gonna
Hang on,
say.
let me pull out her employee
Yeah.
file. 1 second.
Yeah.
No, I don't, look, I try not to. It's a funny comment. It's an interesting comment. It made me think of something that somebody said to me recently, and I'm forgetting who said it, but oh, I know who said it. But they said, Nora Ephron said once, anyone that's only been married once is not that interesting. And so fucking up multiple
Yeah.
times. I try and take screw ups in stride. I try and keep a perspective that we are not doing brain surgery. We are not, nobody is going to die if there's a screw up. That doesn't mean that you blow over them and you don't excel for perfection. We're probably Kim is a much more perfectionist, a much bigger perfectionist than I
Yeah.
am. And I think it's really important. I think details are very important as a casting director, and how you do your job. But nothing's so insurmountable, I don't think, that that it can't be forgiven, or that you don't learn something from it, or kind of go, it's fine, let's move on. I'm trying to think what would be a huge, well, it's not, I mean, I guess it's a screw up. I've told this story before, but when I went in to meet on Final Destination, the original, I just went in knowing that the the writers and the director was going to be in there. They were a team, and I didn't know that there's a third person in the room, the producer. So I go in and we're talking, and there's three people, and I don't know who the third person is. And lovely guy, we're talking, and I have the meeting. And at some point during the meeting, they brought up why I liked it or something, and I said, um, I love the Rube Goldberg aspect of the movie and those kinds of things. But I remember saying, look, you're talking to a guy that passed on American Pie. And because I didn't like it, I didn't want to have to ask teenagers to do the things that were in that script at times. And I thought, this is no, I'm not doing this thing. So I left. The meeting was fine. About an hour later, I get a call from the producer in the room that I did not know, and he said, uh, look, the good news is James and Glenn, the writer and producer and director, they'd love to hire you for it. And even though you shit on my movie American Pie, I'm going to allow them to hire you. So um, I didn't know that he produced that movie.
Mm,
So that could have been a pretty bad fuck up, I guess,
right.
in hindsight. Craig Perry, who's a friend, could have said, screw him, he shit talked my movie. But that's how much I know. those things, look, I'm sure there's 10,000 things Ken could even think of when I put my foot in my mouth.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of filters with me at times. And so I will say things, but I think if you're around me enough, you learn to expect it. I don't know. I don't think Kim's had any real big screw ups. Have you?
Yes.
Mm.
Well, one that really still to this day, when I think about it, I get like a little panicked. And it was when we were gonna do the remake of Ghostbusters. But then, oh, why am I blanking on his name? Passed away. And so Ivan said, I'm tabling this film. I can't do it without him. He was one of the Ghostbusters, who was his close friend.
Harold Ramis.
Yes, Harold
Yeah,
Ramis passed away. So we had
yeah.
started on it. Harold Ramis passes away. Ivan sort of tables the project. But when we were, I think there was a couple months that we thought it was happening and we were doing it. And I was an assistant at the time. And so I was sending the first sort of list, the creative list of here are all our ideas and the availabilities and photos and credits and links to material. It's this huge document of basically just like the creative thinking of the project for these two main roles. And as someone who's a perfectionist and has OCD, I, triple check every email address that I send it to. I copied all of the CCs from a different email chain from the same project. So I knew they were safe, dragged them over, no problem. I hit send on the email. It's a Friday night. And about 2 hours later, the head of casting at Fox starts texting me and calling me nonstop. And she goes, why, can I curse?
Yeah.
Why the fuck did you send that to a manager? Why is a manager at Luber Rockland on this email? And how do they know who's in the mix for this role? I mean, it had like, these are the people with notes and likes and things. And I had somehow copied some chain that either he mistakenly was on or some snafu that just... And I had a full panic attack, and I think about it to this day. And that's why I just, I think the biggest lesson is I called John in tears, and I think John was like at dinner. And I think it's sort of to the point of your boss, he, after I'd been yelled at by the head of casting at Fox for a good 30 minutes, John just said, listen, you fucked up. It's fine. Apologize. We'll fix it. We're not, again, we're not curing cancer over here. It's a list of ideas for a movie. By Monday, everyone will be fine and be over it. And so I think, what I took from that is what I tell every assistant. I say, like, triple check who you're sending an email to always. But also...
Assistants, you say that to me all the time.
Oh, yeah. I was trying. Well, sometimes,
Yeah. No, sometimes it's needed. A lot of the times it's needed.
So I try to reiterate that part, but also I really try to instill the mantra just of the office of like, we're all human. You're going to make a mistake. Just move on and learn from it. I've never accidentally CC'd anyone ever since then. So
you guys seem to be a great double act like that, because
Yeah. Actually, she catches a lot more problems than I do.
I'm just looping people out as John is accidentally looping them in on every show.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, guys, gosh, thank you. This was so fun. I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and
thank you.
I hope it was fun for you too. But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, anytime. Really great to see you. Congrats on everything you do in Orlando. Really impressive.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Talk soon. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.